Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
And Chodesh Tov. It is also the new month of Adar. It's also Simcha Shabbat. It's also Shabbat Shekalim. It's also our volunteer Shabbat, especially tomorrow. It's a busy, busy Shabbat. But that's not the topic for tonight. For tonight, I wanted to draw your attention to something that is often overlooked in classical Jewish conversation and study. And that is that the Torah has a plot. Yes, we study usually a slice at a time, a verse, even a word, maybe a chapter, but really the Torah is trying to say a few different things over an entire arc that begins with Bereshit and extends all the way through to Deuteronomy, and in many cases the arc continues all the way through the Bible entirely until Divrei Hayamim, until the books of Chronicles at its conclusion. Now, we're not going to go into all of those mega plots. I'm happy to share them with you if you want to discuss them later. But I want to talk about one plot that helps us understand a question which you might not have considered asking, and yet which should be on the top of your mind as we discuss this week's Torah portion. Because we are about to discuss Terumah, Parashat Terumah. And this is the Torah portion where people stop reading the Bible. That is to say, when people first decide, I am going to read the Bible, I'm going to sit down, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and now I'm going to read it. They'll make their way through Genesis with a few little page skippings when they do the genealogies. And they'll get through all the narratives of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, the story of Joseph, and then they'll get to the epic story of Moses and the Exodus from Egypt, and they'll get to the crossing of the sea and even the beauty of the Ten Commandments, and they might falter a little bit in last week's Torah portion of Mishpatim when they start doing the laws, but even there's some interesting stuff. And then this week, bam, blueprints. This is how wide you make the temple. This is how big you make it. This is what you weave it out of. You're going to use gold to cover this. And the box is going to be this long and that wide. And this is how tall. And people just go, okay, I'm done. They might skip a few pages and accidentally get up into Leviticus where they get all the sacrifices, and then they really are checked out. But I promise you that there is much to be learned from all of this. But at the moment, I want to focus on one aspect to learn, which comes from one of the overarching plots of the Torah itself. And that is to say that the tabernacle is going to be a place unlike any that has been described to this point in the Torah. And that means we should be taking notice. After all, we've had sacrifices before. We've had religious services before. We've had people connecting to God before. Why do we need this building? Why do we need these items? Why do we need this ritual, this formula, this prison for our spirituality? Well, we have to look at the Ark to understand this. We go back the very, very, very first time that we see somebody reaching out to God in worship. Does anybody know the very first time that appears on the pages of the Bible, of the Torah? What's that? Before Noah. He's going to be important in a second, but before Noah.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Cain
and Abel.
and Abel, yeah.
Cain and Abel, right? The first two children of Adam and Eve, they are the first people that we see that wish to offer something up to God as a form of a sacrifice, as a form of worship. Sure, their parents had chats with God, but these two, they're doing something official. They're doing something a bit formal. And the result of that activity? Not so good, right? Cain brings just, what he's got lying around, whereas his brother Hevel brings the very best from his flocks. And when Cain sees that Abel's connection to God is much more powerful, a much deeper experience, what would be the logical lesson to learn?
Offer better stuff.
I better do a better job next time. Right?
Celebrate your brother's achievement.
It's like when you're in school, and we've got a few school-age people around, or people who are not too far out of school. When you're in school and you don't do as well on a test as you would have liked to have done, well, there's two options. Either I should study more next time, or I should blame the kid who got a higher grade than me because he wrecked the curve. And unfortunately, Cain picks the second option. He gets angry at his brother for doing better, and so he murders him. That's where we begin with sacrifices, with worship, with people trying to reach out to God. They do it on their own terms. They do it as they feel. And as they do it as they feel, they get it very, very wrong, and it ends up actually causing murder in the end result. Now, we do see a few other examples of more constructive reaching out to God. We see Noah offer up some sacrifices as well after the tragedy of the flood, although how much of that was a deep upwelling of feeling within him of reaching to God and how much of it was survivor's guilt, we can debate endlessly. But then we get the real paradigm. We get Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and throughout the narratives of that family, they are constantly erecting altars, offering up sacrifices to God in joyous and wonderful ways. And they seem to do it just at the drop of a hat. Wherever they happen to be, if there is a special moment that they are having between themselves and God, boom, they build an altar, they grab a handy ram or goat, and they make a sacrifice. Well, why couldn't we have just continued like that? Why build a Mishkan? Why build a tabernacle? Why have all of this ritual? Why make all the regulations we're going to see in Leviticus? Why not just carry on, letting it be totally spontaneous? Well, we have to understand that as much as the Torah is praising our ancestors for doing what they did, they are also the edge cases. They are not the norm. That's why they are singled out for attention. That is why they become the progenitors of the family that eventually receives Torah, because they are not normal. And yes, that means that as Jews, we have been weird since day one. And as they were weird, we could not rely on their behavior becoming naturally reproduced by the average person. There are amazing Olympians out there that are able to do feats of athleticism that boggle the mind. The fact that they can run that fast doesn't mean that I should expect somebody to show up at my house as though they too were capable of running that fast. It's like, well, I don't understand. The world record for a marathon is only a couple hours, and it took you like 5 days to get to my house. What's wrong with... No, that's because they are exceptional and the rest of us are normal. Well, we had superstars in our ancestry who showed the potential for what happens when you can reach up to God, but also showed that it was not going to happen dependably, reliably, if left to our own devices. Either we would end up with the Cain and Abel situation, where people would bring whatever they felt like at the time and would not exert themselves to reach higher than where they already were, or we would end up with only the occasional sacrifice that would happen at all, and people would not reach up at all. They would allow themselves to simply disconnect from that divine realm and, well, not avail themselves of the benefits of the relationship they could have with God. The only reliable way to overcome human inertia was to actually put something in place. Now, putting it in place was very important because God wanted to teach us that God knows that we are not going to all be Olympians in the spiritual world. We're not all Abraham. We are not Isaac. We are not Jacob, and we are certainly not Moses. But that doesn't mean that we are deprived of an opportunity to be with, to connect to God. Instead, we are given sort of the beginner's guide to spirituality. We are given a structure for spirituality. And that comes in a particular shape because left to our own devices, we would mess it up. And that comes at the particular timetable because left to our own devices, we would procrastinate. And that allows us to have a structure which enables even the least spiritually inspired or talented among us to, when engaging with this system, to find an opportunity for a spiritual moment. Now, the tabernacle is long since gone. The temple which replaced it is long since been destroyed. But Judaism has recognized that that underlying structure, that underlying system of having both a place as well as a set of ritual as well as a particular time for these rituals, that is still an essential and helpful system to have. I think all of us, if we are being honest, would say, left to my own devices at 7 p.m., I wouldn't suddenly stand up in my living room and start having a service to God. And even if I did occur to me, the words that I am given through my tradition wouldn't have occurred to me, at least not in their entirety and their beauty and complexity. And so instead, we rely upon the choreography of our ancestors, the time, the space, and the shape of our words, in order to elicit a response from us that we would be unable to reliably and correctly elicit from our own spirit. And yet, we find in this prepackaged form an opportunity to find something that is unique to each and every one of us. This is not the prayers that the rabbi says. This is not the prayers that the priest say. This is the prayers that each of us say because each of us, in saying them, has a unique experience, a unique opportunity to find some connection that no one else in this room, no one else in this planet is having at exactly that same time. This is the beauty that our ancestors have given us, and one of the lessons the Torah has trying to teach us, that there is a way to reach out to God. We don't leave it to chance, and we don't leave it to our own frivolous whims of a particular moment, but instead, we prepare ourselves to have this best experience. And then, as you all have, we show up and we see what we can do. Shabbat Shalom.